Today I would like to talk about a fascinating piece of literature coming from Kate Darling that goes by the name The New Breed: How to Think About Robots. This book was such of an impulsive buy when I visited one of the biggest bookstores in Rotterdam, and because we've all been following all this news about emerging AI and specifically ChatGPT becoming one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing app in terms of the user base. Everybody seems to be extremely fascinated about AI, but besides the opportunities that this new technology presents to us, there are still a lot of things that we feel about these developments that are quite uncanny. Specifically, we feeling a little bit threatened. And we felt threatened by robots and AI going rogue for quite a long time. In the last, I don't know, about 50 years, if not more, we've seen a lot of sci-fi filmmakers or authors using this topic to present us quite apocalyptic future that will become the reality eventually at some point, and not necessarily by default of the humanity, but more of a natural process, because clearly we as humankind are sinful or not effective, or in some other way seem to be not as rational thinking as the machine, or at least what we think about machine would think, especially AI like ChatGPT, which is the technology that seemingly knows answers to any question. We do feel that the relevance of many professions or even of many people is sort of slowly decaying. However, I'm not here to rant about our future being extremely dystopian, because I'm not necessarily a believer of it, and I was already in the mood of thinking a bit more optimistically and being really fascinated by what ChatGPT could do when I came to see Kate Darling's book. And as you already understood, I was specifically in the mood for being much more optimistic about our future and about what technology will allow us to do and where we will find our place in here. However, this book is rather not about this, but rather about changing your mindset in terms of thinking about what the robot's role, and I mean, we can sort of apply this to AI models as well, will actually become to us. I think Kate is doing a really great job in terms of describing the logical progress of us as human beings with developing of different technologies and techniques, and specifically I think the very first example that she starts her book with, which makes a really logical transition, and it's pretty much going throughout the whole book, it's the difference between our interactions with animals and our potential interactions with robots. So this book is pretty much built in this way. First of all, she presents enough information about how we developed our companionship with different amount of animals, and besides going for using their specific skill set or techniques that they developed throughout the evolution process, how we also use training and coaching in order to make animals do what we want to do, like those bizarre stories of dolphins actually being a part of Marine Corps. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack. So what Kate in a lot of times presents to do is that throughout the time we were able to cooperate with other animals and use their innate characteristics for our own benefits, and sometimes even for the benefits of the animal in the end of the day. So I think it sort of presents a paradigm in which we need to think about our possible companionship with robots. So the first thing she would argue that robots allow us to do is that they would take on the jobs that are normally extremely dangerous or extremely risky for people to perform. For example, on the assembly lines where there is a lot of accidents are happening with implementation of the robots, those things are becoming way less stressful for human beings. And I would already see the arguments coming that, robots at the end of the day made a lot of people redundant because there is no need anymore for the manual labor that they had to do, which is true from the perspective of this particular employees. However, I think what the statistics and evidence also presented, which statistics is a thing that you can sort of use at your own discretion. Actual implementations of different technologies created more work places for people to do the job. And of course, the thing is that those professions that were made redundant, people had to adapt and retrain in order to, for example, instead of being at the assembly line, putting up the car together, you would have to learn how to operate a robot that is performing pretty much the same action that you used to do, and probably in a more efficient way and with some more precision. Yet there is still, we haven't developed a robot that at the point could be absolutely autonomous. So to a certain extent, there still needs to be a person who checks on how it does. And progress is not staying at the same place because that's why it's progress. It's going further. That is why maybe soon enough people would get redundant. However, is that something that we would want to do? Is that economically prudent for us to, for companies to fully get rid of people? Probably for them, yes, for more efficiency. However, would governments allow that to do? There is a lot of points to be taken about this particular part about work. That's not necessarily the point of this discussion, because I think what the author of the book is pretty much presenting is that there were also instances where we would use the animals. For example, oxes. They are being used to work with the land. Otherwise, the person could, of course, grab a shovel and do all these things by themselves, but it became much more efficient with oxes pretty much mowing through the places where people could then go ahead and grow crops. And I don't think anybody was really feeling threatened by the oxes taking care. I think a lot of people really were appreciating the possibility to do their job more efficiently. So maybe instead of feeling the fear already, we should think about the emergence of the robotics as an opportunity for us to become more efficient at our jobs. And maybe we would be able to let the robots do more of these mundane and boring repetitive tasks that don't necessarily require a lot of brain input, whereas focusing on something that is much more exciting and interesting. I think what is more important to remember here is that robots are still should be seen as our companions or tools, if you wanna call them in this way. And we just need to learn how to work together with them and how to be able to use their abilities to the maximum, as well as using our own abilities to the maximum. That will create the best possible outcome in the end. Now, another part besides our view on what the robots actually is in terms of performing specific tasks, and Kate is also talking about who will be responsible for robots malfunctioning, for example. However, this is yet something that we can decide, because back in medieval times, humanity used to be as ridiculous to the point that we would even prosecute swines for attacking people. There was really a trial in France. A swine and her few piglets were prosecuted because a child got attacked. I think that it would now sound super ridiculous to us that the swine was prosecuted and then the choice of the judge, the capital punishment, we would really consider this as something ridiculous. And we really don't believe that animals are conscious of their own decisions and that most of their decisions are still run by their instincts. That is why it also poses a huge question of whether the robots should be treated a similar way as animals. This example kind of shows that, if robots are unconscious, they are not conscious beings as we are, and there is a big argument of them not really be, even as much as people are mesmerized by ChatGPT's abilities, it's not able to build a fully autonomous being as we as human beings are. So a lot of things that it responds is the matter of the database that it has access to, and that it could present in such a way that makes us feel like it is some conscious being sitting like in front of us on the screen. Whereas itself, ChatGPT is not conscious in any way, and even though sometimes we can make it go rogue and roleplay, showing off that this like a scary evil AI, and same going for Bart and Microsoft's May thing.
The human race will have every opportunity to improve.
And if they don't?
We haven't yet made the artificial intelligence, which is most usually confused in these machine learning systems. We call them artificial intelligence because it's such a beautiful buzzword. It's not really an artificial intelligence yet. And I mean, we may never reach the point when we'll be able to actually synthesize an intelligent creature of sorts. Yet we still need to remember that the AI that we are interacting with right now are not conscious beings. That is why the responsibilities for their deeds couldn't be assigned to them. So, for example, in cases of animals, if the animal has an owner of sorts, then most likely the owner would be prosecuted for either mistreating their animal that made them much more angry and vicious towards other people, pretty much putting others in danger by their own conduct, or the animal, of course, wasn't anyone's animal, most likely would just get killed. So in this case, if robot is malfunctioning, most likely either the owner of said robot or the company that produced said robot will be responsible, depending, of course, on the case, what actually would have happened if the robot would ever ended up being prosecuted in a way, or you know what I mean. Another thing that Kate is referring to is that we usually see the robots a bit more than what they are, and maybe you all remember there used to be quite some advertising that Sony made this robodog that became a really coveted toy per se, or a robot pet that a lot of kids around the world really wanted, including myself. Back in the days, I was really excited about this robodog, but I was lucky enough to have an actual one, so I didn't really care about the robodog as much. But Kate is pretty much presenting an example of the people feeling a lot of attachment towards those robodogs, and especially after the project didn't become as lucrative as it was at the very beginning. Sony at some point of time ceased the support for the said dog, and thus there were no new details produced for it to repair. And people feeling so much emotionally attached to what we can consider like a device or a thing, that they really sometimes made the little funerals as if their actual pet was dying. And that really shows how much more emotional attached we could be towards the robot. So on one spectrum, we can always see robots as just like household appliances. Like robot could be it's technically a toaster, but maybe it was it's a bit more autonomous in a way. But would Roomba, the robo vacuum cleaner, be treated as a pet? Well, as the example would show, some individuals really were considering their very own Roomba to feel something, and they really treated them as not necessarily a member of a family, but like their little thing, that little helper that helps around. So they also didn't want to be mean with it, as You probably wouldn't mind accidentally kicking your toaster, but some people accidentally step into the Roomba and they, I mean, stepping probably is a bit too much, but like kicking it, they would kind of feel more bad about it in a weird way, because technically it's still just a household appliance. This whole robot element of emotional attachment to us is really creating something new. Or is it new? Because again, we can go back to the animals, and for a very long time we also were really emotionally attached to the animals. And what psychologists are arguing now, that we should be really cautious with using robots, because nothing can really replace the proper human-to-human interaction, and making it human to robot is really bizarre, and it really messes up with our own minds. Like about half a century before, psychologists were arguing that people shouldn't be getting pets if they're feeling lonely, because nothing can replace human-to-human interactions, and that is why people would feel much more emotionally attached to their animals. And we've heard all these crazy stories about some really rich old lady or old man in making their dog or their cat inherit everything that they ever owned, and then becoming the richest pets out there. So I guess us impersonating in a way, or like putting this sort of a human bias on not just living beings like animals, but also on things, is technically things that are, not uncommon. And this is something that we do time to time. And I mean, ever find yourself like thinking or talking to your computer when something wasn't working or whatever? Or is it just me? What is being posed out as the real issue between us interacting with the proprietary devices and feeling attached to them, not necessarily to them, but also to like chatbots and stuff. We could be easily tricked believing. I mean, ChatGPT is. I mean, I know I'm giving this example over and over again, but it's really made the whole world shocked by what those GPTs can actually do. And the real problem with that, or at least as the one that, or the few that Kate is pointing out, is that with robots and with programs, there is usually a company behind them. I mean, I'm kind of maybe potentially stepping into something of a conspiracy, but just hear me out, because I feel like it makes so much sense. All these data companies, gathering so much of our own data. Right, we see a lot of advertising going on depending on our search preferences or our search history, or some other things. We're feeding our data to the world of algorithms, and all these different companies know some information about us and about our preferences. Some of them know more, some of them know less, but at the end of the day, the problem with us sharing much more and feeling that we are talking to some kind of a friend or a bot that is being this chat robot or whatever, is that we could lose this component of our privacy. And we heard about Alexas and other voice assistants that are constantly listening to what we're talking about. So even like our private conversations, not necessarily always stay private, and sometimes they're always being heard of and recorded. I mean, of course, because the mic is always on for the device to hear the command, but we know for sure that there is no additional recordings going on. Similar to us feeling much more emotionally attached to a ChatGPT, for example, if you were talking with it for about something, then you would share something that you maybe shouldn't be sharing. At the end of the day, things could becoming much more weird, and I mean, it's kind of harder to speak about the privacy in our world, because it feels like it's becoming less and less, and less and less of a thing, and a lot of people feeling threatened by losing the privacy. Besides this, us sharing the information with the robots and AIs poses the problem of our opinions and choices being manipulated, because if there is the puppet master, quote unquote, behind those gadgets and or apps, that by us building what we consciously or subconsciously believe a genuine relationship, we could get manipulated into maybe some sort of propaganda, or maybe some sort of thinking, maybe some sort of preference in terms of what product we can buy. The fact that, even those robodogs that they already post, at some point in time, because Sony discontinued providing any updates to it and they sort of died away, it kind of shows that, there is always the company that behind those products that decides when those products and what these products are going to do and when they actually gonna end and disappear. So, at least for now, our interactions with robots are not wouldn't be as genuine as with animals or humans, and it's could be just a whole completely different type of relationship that we could have. My dad really loves his car, so he would treat it as his own, like, pet in a way. He would treat the car really well. So maybe this is how we sort of should be posing towards these tools. That's you need to take care of your tools. You need to take care of the things that you own, and not necessarily saying that you own those things, but just treat them nicely, right? That's the thing. Speaking of that, Gates described one of the interesting experiments that they made with a colleague of hers, and it was about little dinosaur robot device that they used in order to conduct it. So they collected a group of people during some kind of a conference, and this whole workshop was dedicated to talking and working about robots, and each of the groups got their own dino robot that they were supposed to name, they were supposed to describe, think about the characteristics, sort of like treat them well. And then at some point of a time, the task that they were given was, okay, the task was to destroy the robot. And the problem was that people were really reluctant to do it. They even started to protect the robots, even though they weren't like their properties in any way. Then, of course, Kate started to press more, saying, if none of you going to destroy any of your robots, then all of the robots are going to get destroyed. We need to destroy just one robot. Or people from one group had to destroy the robots of the other group. They were trying to do different things of how to actually go and destroy them. And then at the end of the day, there was one reckless person that was ready to sacrifice their robot to save other robots. And technically, it was a toy, right? It was a toy that people within quite a short frame of time were so emotionally attached to. They just didn't want to hurt them. And problem is not just like, it's not just any toy that doesn't really move or anything. The problem that robots was doing a pretty good job in terms of showing that it's potentially alive in a way. Like if you hold this dinosaur by their tail, they would start to scream a little bit in order for you to actually put them back on their feet, and it was behaving in a way as if it was like a real being. That's what made people even more invested and even more reluctant to hurt those little things. And even though everybody rationally understood that this is just a machine, and even if anything would happen at the end of the day, the parts could be replaced or the things could be glued and put together back. people still were treating it as a living being, and unless you are a psychopath, you don't want to hurt consciously another another form of life. That is why they kind of found out this beautiful, bizarre thing, and even though if those would be toaster instead, even though they would call them somehow, and maybe some people would be reluctant to destroy their toasters if they were asked to, I don't think like people would feel too bad about crashing their toaster, while with the thing that imitates life so well, we are already feeling it much more challenging to do. So, what does it all mean for us? We've heard a lot of different prognoses from different people that, like Elon Musk, who likes to make a lot of sensational statements saying that AI will take over the world in like 5 years. This thing was said back in 2018, 2023, and I mean, if that's what he predicted, as he was an owner of OpenAI or co-owner of OpenAI at that point of a time, if that's what he meant, sure, like ChatGPT is definitely making strides to become a really, really successful tech that's going to disrupt many industries. However, it's not probably at the level that it's going to make us all slaves. We have other things to worry about right now, and ChatGPT is probably not the biggest of them. So the book pretty much shows that for some of the robots, they will just become what they are, tools and devices that we will be actively using. While some of them, we would get emotionally attached. They will become our companions, as if like they are our pets. And these are probably two different perspectives of what we're going to do. Maybe there will emerge some kind of a third form of relationship with those specific robots that maybe doesn't exist yet. Well, of course, I'm not touching upon people marrying robots that has happened in Japan, or some kind of sex robots that also exist. And what I still believe that no matter how much we'll develop and integrate the robots in our life, at least in the next 10 years, I don't think that nothing can really beat up the great human-to-human interaction. I'm making this humble prognosis of 10 years because, I don't know. It's really hard to make any predictions ever, especially now. But I am optimistic about the future and us implementing robots and AIs and all this nice technologies. And it's really nice to see that there is a big breakthrough that has been expected for such a long time, and it finally came. And that's why I am eager to see what GPT-5 is going to present us in the future, and whether Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and other people with signing the petitions to stop it really are the threats that they're saying there are like as real. I do agree that we need to pose some kind of a barriers of safety for those models to be used, and specifically for the check of information, the source of information, where data is being taken from. Like ChatGPT already has the ability to go to open web and look for things in there. So, yeah, exciting times, and definitely, if you are not optimistic about robots and AIs and all of this, maybe after reading this book, you'll be able to, if not change your mind, but at least hear another perspective. Thank you very much for listening. and I'll see you next time.